Hello, good evening.
Hi.
I wanted to come on this evening and answer a question that I got yesterday where I typed out the answer, but it wasn't really clear because it is a very complex issue. And the question that I got was from someone asking about unexplainable weight gain. So she's noticed that she's been gaining weight, but there hasn't been any nutrition she hasn't been eating a ton, and she was curious if there was an explanation from the German New Medicine perspective about why that might be that she was gaining weight. And while there are a few reasons, there's one that's really important to talk about, and I haven't made a video about it yet, so I wanted to talk about it tonight. And it's one of, Dr. Hammer even said that this is one of his most important discoveries, is this particular family of conflicts, and they are the AIRE conflicts. So A-I-R-E. A is for abandonment, I is isolation, R is refugee, and then E is existence. And so in German New Medicine, if you're unfamiliar, Dr. Hammer discovered that every disease process, every symptom that we experience, everything that goes on with our bodies is the result of either an adaptation or a healing phase made after a person is in a conflict, so that something happens, something unexpected, something surprising, something that caught you off guard, and in that moment your body went into an adaptation state. And that adaptation state is a primal programming. It's from ancient evolution. The body has developed over time to have these defense mechanisms. So the conflict related to this unexplainable weight gain possibly is the AIRE conflict. So like I said, abandonment, so feeling abandoned. A lot of times this will happen in children. We'll get abandonment conflicts when they get taken to school for the first time. I mean, if you have a divorce, all sorts of different situations can have a person, and all of these conflicts are all interpreted by the individual. And so this is all an individual's perception. So something might happen to someone and they might not have an abandonment conflict, even though from the outside you would say, yeah, that person got abandoned, but they may not experience it that way. On the other side of it, something could happen that you're like, that no one really abandoned you, but that person could feel abandoned. So all that matters is that person's individual experience and how they felt. And so if they felt abandoned, this could trigger the conflict. Also, isolation. So this happens a lot if a person is like in the hospital and they get left there and they're not with their family, they're not with their pack anymore, and so they feel alone, they feel isolated. That could also trigger this conflict. Refugee. So we've got a lot of like displaced families right now because of fires and hurricanes, actual refugees. And so when you no longer have a home, no longer have like your place, your family, you feel lost and alone. And then also existence. And so an existence conflict can take place when you have a diagnosis, when you are faced with something that you think you might die, or you're just kind of faced, you have a realization one day and you're faced with this kind of existence conflict. So what happens when you have this type of conflict? It triggers something deep within us, all the way back to when water-dwelling creatures were the only creatures on the planet. And so a water-dwelling creature, to stay alive, to continue surviving, the most dangerous thing for a water-dwelling creature is to be washed up on the shore. And so it needs to be able to survive. It's kind of like a last-ditch effort. Let's do everything we can to survive for when the tide comes back in, and so when the water washes us back into our normal environment. And so the program that gets triggered, it's the kidney collecting tubule. And so the kidney collecting tubule, so there's several parts of the kidney, so this isn't the same for all kidney dysfunctions or things that we experience as kidney disease. This is a very particular part of the kidney, the collecting tubules. And so what happens is there's proliferation in the kidney drainage calyx. So basically it blocks up the drain so that the body retains water. And that water retention can result in weight gain. And so, and obviously swelling. And so there's swelling, there's weight gain, you're holding on to all of this water. Think of it like a water reserve, because that's truly what your body is doing. It's holding on to all of the water that it can because it's experiencing this fish out of water conflict. It's experiencing this abandonment, existence, refugee conflict. And so as long as that conflict is going on, the water will be retained. And so when you think about this in the context of like people and what people experience, I put FOMO on there because that's a form of abandonment. That's this fear. Some people, they're very triggered by fear of missing out. Maybe early on, they had older siblings and they never got to go out, and they, so they kind of got this. They always had this. Oh, I'm always left behind. I'm always left behind. Having this abandonment, and so they're very sensitive to that. I also thought about like the freshman 15, like when kids go away to college. We say, oh, they gain 15 pounds because they eat a bunch of crap because they're away from home. And I think what it actually is you're used to being around your family, you're used to being around your pack, and you get out into the world and you're kind of isolated and you don't have your family. We're all pack animals. We like to be around people that we're comfortable with, and you're here out at college and you may have a bit of this kidney collecting tubule conflict in retaining water. And 1 liter of water can retain up to 2.2 pounds on your body. And so you got people who drink a lot of water too, especially if you're trying to lose weight. So you've got this unexplainable weight gain. You don't know why you're gaining weight, and people say, oh, drink a ton of water. Water will help you lose weight. And then you're drinking a bunch of water, and then your body is retaining water, and what happens is it gets stored in your fat cells. And so your fat cells store the water and expand, and so that could be one of the reasons that the weight gain is there.
Yeah, the thing about going to college too is it could be even like breaking away from your social group and your friends and all that stuff.
Oh yeah,
too,
true.
So if you go to this new place and I think getting back to the whole idea about how metaphorical this whole thing is and how the body is. And I was actually thinking about this right before we started this video. Do you know how, like, I don't know if you've ever had any experience interacting with someone who's a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist, or they're just interested in those things and then reading into things and then interpreting things. You almost have to be careful about what you say, because everything that you say is a sign of some kind of
right, yeah.
It's a sign that, you've got some kind of weird hang up about this, that, the other thing, and everything means something other than what it seems to mean. There's a sense in which the body sort of responds in that same way, because the body is so hung up on survival. It's so preoccupied with what could every experience that you have is in some way or another interpreted by the body in terms of what it says about your environment, about your survival probability, about more specifically about what's most likely to be the biggest threat to your survival over a period of time. And when you understand that, you can begin to say, okay, if my body were to interpret this anger that I'm having because someone cut me off in traffic as a threat to my survival, because that's what it is that the reason you're having that experience is that experience is in some way communicating to your bodily tissues what's going on, right? The body's, for one thing, it may be motivating you to either get ready to fight something or to flee a situation that could be dangerous, but the body is also responding to that, because there's no kind of like wasted sensation, there's no wasted experience. Rest assured that the body is responding to everything about what it is like to be you. And so that's a useful exercise, I think, to say, I'm feeling a little left out in the situation. And we don't typically think about our health in that. If we're a little too sick to go somewhere, or I don't know, maybe we hurt our foot or something, and we can't take part in some kind of a family activity, we don't usually think about, okay, how's my body interpreting this, right? Because aside from the fact that, you hurt your foot, you're not thinking about your body. You're thinking about how you want to go play. But if the body were to interpret this negative emotion that you were having, in what way would it interpret it? And it would interpret it as separation. And it's this most general, big picture kind of interpretation here, because we're dealing with these ancient tissues who they're not evolved, they're not like cutting edge, they're not the brightest necessarily, because they got a huge personal history. And that's the thing to understand too, is that like when you're talking to a person, if I'm talking to a client that comes from a specific background where they've had a lot of trauma, I got to understand that everything about what they hear me say is going to be informed. Everything about their perception of me and what I'm saying to them is going to be informed by their personal history. Well, you've got like a genetic history. You've got an evolutionary history that stretches way back beyond anything about like what our modern kind of brains are all about. And so you've got tissues that have been around for that long. And so the embryological stuff is so interesting, because like fetuses, they look so weird, because it's this original origin tissue. It's this ancient, these folds and these grooves and all this different stuff. And you have to understand that tissue has a history, and its interpretation, its response to your experience, is going to be colored tremendously by that personal history. And at some point in our history as an organism, if you had separation, probably in some way or another the biggest threat to your life. I mean, even now, contemporarily, it doesn't happen too often, but if you think about it, something bad's going to happen to you. If something non-traumatic, non-violent is going to get you in trouble, it's going to be running out of water. It's an interesting kind of thing because of the fact that we're, like 98% water, and you can go a lot longer without food. I mean, you can go tremendous amounts of time, right? Like almost a month or more than a month in some cases. But with water, it's only a few days. And so isn't it interesting that the body would be so sensitive in its responses to any kind of sensation you have of danger? It starts hanging on to water because again, ancient tissues, what's most likely to get us in trouble here? Well, we move from the ocean onto the ground. There's not water everywhere now. It's retaining and hanging on to that water. And it might seem so silly. I'm sad that my sister didn't invite me to her wedding shower. Why would I be gaining weight about that? You know what I'm saying? But think about it, though. The body's just getting separation, and separation is what you're removed from everyone else. You're removed from where you normally would be. And how's this ancient embryological tissue going to interpret this? It's not going to do an advanced psychoanalysis and say, well, the thing is, you're afraid of this. It's going to say, oh shit, we better hang on to water because that's the most important thing. And I was thinking about this too, like air. You need air. You can get by without water for longer than you can get by without air. But the interesting thing about air is that we consume so much oxygen in our tissues that you can't, and like just the nature of air and oxygen as a gas, you can't really so we don't have a big air bladder over on our side that we can store up a lot of extra air. And so the body does what it can to hang on to it, but it's just the nature of water, the nature of the fact that our body is sort of just, it's just fluid everywhere. They can really kind of pack in that fluid in the kidneys and everything like that and actually keep more of that in the body because the air goes in your lungs. That's pretty much it. I mean, it goes through your bloodstream, but it doesn't hang out in your tissues for the most part. It's mostly getting used. But with water, we can actually kind of hang on to it, sort of not as well as the camel, but kind of like a camel, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, the camel in the fat hump on the back, that's where the camel stores the water, and that's where we store our water too. And it's really interesting when you look at families that have several children and and only one of them maybe happens to be overweight, and it's okay, well, I wonder what's the difference, because they probably all ate the same food, they all have the same genes, the same parents. How come one of them is overweight and the other ones are not? And it could be just the birth order. It could be something about maybe that child had to go to daycare and the other ones didn't. You know what I mean? Any one of these variables, that child felt more abandoned than the other ones.
Maybe that child was treated exactly the same, but they perceived the same treatment as a different thing, right?
Exactly. Because it's their own sensitivity. It's their own individual personality.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Oh no, what have I done? It wasn't anything that the parents did.
Yeah.
It's that the child's perception just was what it was. And they can literally, it's possible that they were treated better than all of the other children. So that's really interesting because if they were the ones that got preferential treatment, one wonders where that preferential treatment came from. And it probably came from the parents intuitively or perhaps consciously noticing that child was more sensitive, maybe more inclined to feeling being left out. And so that's really it's that perception thing that's so significant. And so it's not even really about correcting this stuff or saying, oh, that's why the problem is there. It's about, I guess, just realizing, oh, maybe psychologically I'm inclined, maybe just perceptually, I'm inclined towards perceiving being left out. I know that to be true. I know that this is so. When you know that that's true, suddenly you can assign a different meaning to the experience of FOMO. And when you assign a different meaning to it, which means you deliberately kind of go inside and say, my experience of this right now is really not that nice, but I know that if it's part of what it's like to be me, it's coming from me, and so probably I know that a lot of experience flows from meaning. And so what am I deciding, perhaps without knowing it, that the fact that I wasn't invited to the housewarming party, what does that mean? What are the meanings that are there? And as you begin to kind of deliberately tinker with those meanings, the experience that flows from them changes. As the experience that flows from them changes, absolutely, unequivocally, biologically, the responses, because it seems far-fetched until you realize that your bodily tissues are responding to your experience, and your experience, by and large, is under your control. I mean, a lot of people don't exercise conscious control over it because no one taught you about it, no one even broached the subject or even suggested it was possible. But we have this ability to kind of do perceptual modulation, experiential modulation, change how it is that we're feeling about this. And you can't change how you're feeling. You can't change the quality of your experience without eliciting a change in the body, because the body's not responding to what you're not experiencing. The body's responding to what you are experiencing. And so anything that's there is surely a response to something that's going on in your experience. And as you change your experience, so the response changes too.
Yeah, so we can look at this in the realm of unexplainable weight gain. So, if your ankles are swollen, if you're just like, why have I gained a couple of pounds? If your rings are tighter, you can kind of tell the difference with like water weight versus fat too. It's more jiggly because there's more water content in the fat. And so just paying attention to that. So that is one level that you could be aware of one of these conflicts going on. But the most important thing about the kidney collecting tubule syndrome, we kind of call it the syndrome just because it's so powerful for healthcare practitioners, for nurses, for doctors. One day medicine will know this is how the body works, and this is such a profound thing to be aware of if somebody is in the hospital, if somebody has a condition, if somebody has a diagnosis. Because when you get a diagnosis of, let's say, a lung tumor, a breast tumor, a colon tumor, so you've got this tumor in your body and you just found out about it, and now you're freaking out, and now you're like, oh my goodness, I have a tumor. What could that trigger in you? It could trigger a death-fright conflict, which is a lung tumor, but it could also, for you, trigger an existence conflict. And if you start retaining water while you have a tumor that's in healing, when the tumor is in healing, all healing happens in a fluid environment. And so there's fluid there anyways. There's fluid on the organ level and fluid on the brain level. And if you start retaining water when you are already in the healing process of another conflict, what appears to happen is it looks like the tumor is growing rapidly. It looks like, you've got this brain tumor that's growing rapidly, but what's happening is there's expansion of the area because there's just so much water. And people will be in a hospital situation and, they're scared because they're in the hospital, they're having, isolation conflicts, existence conflicts, and so their body is retaining lots and lots of water. And that's when things kind of tend to get out of hand, when you're in maybe like a surgery situation, or a person's about to have surgery or finding out about it. So you can see how, because of the kidney collecting tubule syndrome, because we start to retain water, especially when you're afraid and you're panicked and you're away from your pack and you're isolated and you're afraid that you're going to die, fear and panic is the absolute worst thing for all conditions of the body. So whatever it is that you have, and that's why the education about German New Medicine and what the body is doing is so, it just creates peace of mind, because you're like, oh, there's an understandable reason for why this is happening at this point, because I'm at this phase of healing, I'm in phase A, this is my epileptoid crisis, or, I'm in conflict. It's just being aware of this whole entire process, knowing that if you get freaked out, that your body will retain water, and whatever area is healing is going to swell up big time. And so this is such a powerful thing to be aware of just in your own life. So if you're, gaining weight, if you're, afraid of being abandoned, if you have any of those conflicts, to be aware of that. But to know if you're ever in a situation where you've got healing, that's what's going on, and that's what you should be aware of. So I just wanted to share that with you guys tonight. I'm going to do a full tutorial with like the pictures and everything, because it's a complex process, and it's great to know about, okay, so this is what triggers this, and this is where these things are going on. But I wanted to answer that question. So I hope this is helpful for you guys. Let me know if you have any requests for topics, because I'm just kind of going at what is interesting to me as far as the in-depth tutorials. But if you have one that you're like, oh, I really want to learn about this one, let me know, and I will put that on the top of my list. So have a great night.